Hey, folks, thanks for being here. We're talking about astrology today, and I'm super excited to have a very cool guest joining me to shed some light on this topic. So, welcome to the show, Aurorah Yarberry.
Thank you so much, Trish, for having me. This is an absolute pleasure and a true joy to be able to talk about my passion. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad that the stars aligned for us to meet up today. Um, I I wanted to first. I wanted to share. Actually, no, go back. I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I would like you to share just something you'd like everyone to know about you today.
Ooh, me today. Um, so I'm an astrologer and I look at the tides of the planets, if you will, the energetic weather that we're swimming in. And we're recording today. It's March 7th. So we're a week into one of the most intense astrological periods of the year. And I have been kind of on this like up and down sort of emotional roller coaster for about a week now, like these really sort of beautiful, and I'm not somebody who has like a mood disorder. I am unmedicated in that way. But I have really been feeling the waves of energy shifting ever since the new moon in Pisces about a week ago. Which was really sort of this beautiful, like transcendent kind of energy of hope that I just felt sort of, without any um external reason for that hope, but I just felt it. It was just something that was like almost like a babbling brook coming up from my heart chakra. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then Venus went retrograde 2 days later, and I was like, I don't want to get out of bed. But that was because Venus was retrograde in opposition to my moon. And so I've been feeling that, and I, of course, would feel that personally. And then as I had some time to like as that transit kind of like moved away from being so intense for me, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this retrograde period that we're in? And a lot of astrologers are out there talking about, oh, romance is gonna like exes are gonna come back into the picture. And I mean, like, whatever, that may or may not happen. But I was like, okay, for me, this um retrograde period is happening in my second house of values and income. For me, it's made me really reflect on what it is I care about and kind of really wanting to put my money where my mouth is. So I have done something that was risky and scary, and it was something I've never done before. Um, I've been shorting stocks of companies that I do not agree with because of their recent political affiliations and actions. And so I took the amount of money that I would have made in a year as a TV producer and believed in this so much that I put short sell positions against these two companies. And I am watching them go down and then taking my profits and talking about that. Because I think it's something, women don't necessarily always know how the financial industries work. And I'm learning too. I am doing this as a learning process, sharing what I'm doing very openly, very candidly. It's risky. I do not advise everyone to do it. But for me, I think it is a statement of personal values. And these people really genuinely only care about money. But when their valuations of their companies really, take a nosedive overnight, which they are doing in the course of this retrograde period. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see a downtrend for the duration of Venus retrograde. But I think while that is a finite period of time, it is a key time for people to be able to make their voices heard in a way that is really impactful and can help to change this tide of things where, we have felt sort of overwhelmed by the amount of change. that people have had thrust upon them that I don't think a lot of people actually voted for. So that's something that has been on my mind. um, and yeah, it's risky. I don't necessarily recommend this behavior to everybody, but I do think it is a political statement. It's a protest in my own way. I'm not out there burning factories to the ground. That's happening. But I think that if we are strategic about what we do and when we do it with our money, even in small increments, one person could short one share of these stocks each and could really drive the valuation down and make a powerful statement. If everybody does a little, nobody has to do a whole lot. So that's kind of where I'm at today. So yeah, kind
Yeah,
of
well,
random.
I appreciate you sharing, and I appreciate your, taking advantage of your right to protest and protesting silently in a way that enables you to be standing up for your values. So, I think that's important, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks.
It's it's inspiring. Um, Anytime I hear a story about someone using their voice, and it's interesting because you're not actually using your voice in like an audible way, but you're
Yeah.
still using it in a way to make an impact. And like I said, just standing up for your values. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
um,
Um,
and something you mentioned uh, and we'll get into this more, but um, how the way the planets shift actually can affect the way things are shifting, like you're saying, even financially, even with the way corporations are functioning. And so I think that's really interesting. And it's something I was going to ask you later, but since we're there, I wanted to ask how, the way the planets shift or even the energy of the moon can have larger impacts on the planet that we can actually see.
oh yeah. No, I mean, so there's a dozen or more different directions I could take that in. Um, I mean, I think one thing that's interesting is I mean, so for example, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind most sort of recently is we had Pluto, our slowest moving in astrology. He's still considered a planet. I know NASA begs to differ, but as an astrologer, we count Pluto. And he moved from Capricorn, where he had been since 2008. And he moved from the sign of Capricorn, which was very focused on big business and top down power structures. So at the beginning of 2008, we saw the collapse of financial systems only to really kind of get rebuilt and consolidated to be stronger and more capitalistic, right? And then we saw that kind of continue until COVID, which things kind of collapsed a bit. And that's sort of due to a big triple conjunction that happened back in 2019 with Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And that kind of kicked off the whole COVID cycle from an energetic astrological perspective. So that's one thing that we can look to historically to see. But I think more recently, when Pluto moved from this very, materialistic point of view of world governance, might makes right, and right means dollars. Whoever has the gold makes the rules, regardless of whether those rules are ethical. We are seeing our slowest moving, most impactful planet he moves at a glacial speed. I mean, I'm talking 1 to 2 degrees a year, where he's actually progressing. And that's not including his retrograde cycle. So he'll go through like maybe 2, 3, 4 degrees and go backwards for 6 months. And then he kind of is about halfway. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of a dance with him. So he's really slow to make moves. But when he does, like he did in November last year, November 19th, he shifted from that very last degree of Capricorn And then we moved him in, not we, but he moved into Aquarius, which is the sign of the humanitarian, the grassroots, the people taking back their power. And I think that's what we're sensing now collectively, is that people are waking up and kind of saying, we're not okay with what with the people who are in power, how they got there, or what they're doing with it. We are not okay with this collectively. We're seeing mass protest pop up all over. But I would say one of the most like um, this event like made headlines globally, and I was like, well, that is a Pluto in Aquarius headline if I have ever seen one, and that was Luigi Mangione, and what he did. That I mean, it's the humanitarian. It's a sign of people standing up for their rights. And Pluto is death. Pluto is change. It's revolution. It's rebellion. It's the collapse of systems that are outdated and serving people in positions of power that just maybe they've gotten too big for themselves and they have to course correct, then to kind of go to the opposite polarity to where it will be more like small collectives and groups of individuals who are coming together to provide for their communities. So it will be more about like, oh, well, this little group and this pocket of people over there, they're really good at farming or something. Like that's a really great co-op that's going on over there. I think I'm going to go support them for my food instead of the global conglomerate of um, agriculture and pharmaceuticals. And I think you're seeing this show up in the resurgence of people being interested in things like herbalism and living off the grid, because the systems that are in place have proven to be so far capitalistic that it is hurting the people that they are taking from so much that they feel like they cannot do anything other than to go to work, to pay their bills, to go to work. And it's just this very sad sort of sick cycle that we're in, but people are waking up and looking for alternatives. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And historically, we can look back at historical events, like what happened when Pluto was in Aquarius the last time around, 240 years ago. He takes that long to move around the zodiac. And when that happened, we had the American Revolution against England. So it's like we have reached this pinnacle of irony in some ways cosmically. And as that sort of unfolds, the energy swell will just revolt against it and it'll collapse. I don't know when, I don't know exactly when, but it will happen. Probably sooner rather than later. It will not take that long.
It's really interesting to hear about how the planetary movements can actually be, well, the effects of their movements can really be seen in a, like almost a tangible way. And it's so cool when you talk about, when you look at historical events and how they relate to these planetary movements, it's almost like you can predict certain, not exact things, but you can predict certain shifts in humanity that are going to happen.
Yeah. I like to say that when I look at astrology charts, whether it's for a person, a client, or if I'm doing my own meditative work and I'm looking at what the vibe, what the energy feels like to me, it's almost like I get bullet points of like A, B, C, and D are likely to happen under these conditions. It's a situation of probability, likelihood. And that's really what astrology is. It's a study of probability based on historical observations going back to the Babylonians. So in some ways, we have literally thousands of years of data sets at our disposal to look back at and say, well, this happened then, and then, this other thing going on that adds this flavor to it, And so we can kind of get a sense of what the vibe of a menu might be, if if this was a restaurant, we'd be like, okay, I think there might, well, it's a the moon's in Pisces. There might be fish on the menu today, but how does that show up? How does that fish get cooked and show up to the table? That's where the universe likes to, I think, conspire to surprise us and keep us on our toes.
Yeah, thank you. I like that menu metaphor. It helps, me as someone who knows very little about astrology kind of understand how it plays out. So thank you for breaking it down for me. So I'd like to sort of zoom in now and kind of look at the ways that understanding astrology can help understand shifts in ourselves as individuals. And something I heard, I think it was episode 1 on your podcast.
Oh my God, way back when.
I did my research.
Went all the way back in the time machine. Good for
All the way
you.
back. So, and it was so cool. So I don't know if it was you that said it or your friend Ariana, but you were
Yeah.
talking about how the moon affects the ocean tides. And you were talking about how, there are people that think these concepts are like bullshit. And
Yeah.
you're like, if the moon can affect the tides and humans are 90% water, doesn't it make sense that the moon is affecting us? And I was just like mind blown. I was like, that is so logical. But I've never heard that explained. So it really helped me. I was like, oh, I get it. Like this makes sense, even for someone who's like a skeptic. Like
Yeah.
you can see this.
Yeah. And I think skepticism is very healthy. I support it because it challenges me as somebody who has an instinctual understanding of this to make this something that's more accessible and sort of standing up for the thing that I inherently know to be such a helpful healing modality for understanding the world around us, understanding ourselves, to talk about things in a way that are grounded in science, that are grounded in reality. And I think it's a wonderful reminder to keep me grounded quite physically in my own energy and not just like float off into Never Never Land. Because it really does require both of these things. We need to be grounded enough that our feet are still able to walk around on Earth and do the things we need to do in our human bodies, but we also need to be able to be open to the unseen realms around us. And I think that's what astrology can help us to tune in to do, to exercise our own internal intuition and to really flex that muscle. Because it's something that as we do it, and I think most people at some point in their life will have some kind of what they might call a spiritual crisis, where they are questioning what they know to be real, questioning themselves, questioning their sanity at some point. Some people have more than one and they're much more frequent, but I would say that most people on this planet at some point in their lives begin to question things. And that is opening this door into things that are there, that are invisible largely most of the time, but unless you're willing to be brave enough to look at yourself in the context of your own shadow work, and in the environment in which we're swimming in, and really critically consider the structures within which we operate and live. Um, I I think that astrology can be a beautiful modality to explore those things. But not just that. I mean, it can just, I mean, farmers help use the moon to help plan crop planting. And if you plant during a waxing, growing Taurus moon, your crop yields are likely to be considerably higher than if you were to plant those same seeds on a Gemini moon. Gemini is very dry energy, whereas a Taurus moon is nurturing. It's like what those little seedlings want to get rooted well. So there's a reason why this knowledge has been so respected and so revered. And I also suspect there's a reason why people have purposefully maligned it since the Industrial Revolution, when astrology and science really parted ways.
Okay. So, probably my first exposure to astrology was when I was young, and I'm going to guess I'm a, a bit older than you are. So when I was a kid in the 80s,
I
reading
was
like,
in the 80s,
well, then
mid
have,
80s.
okay. So have you heard of then Corey Haim and Corey Feldman?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because, all right, they were two of my faves. And that's who popped into my head when I thought about teen magazines like
Oh,
Tiger
okay.
Beat and Bop.
Mhm.
Anyway, this was probably my first exposure to astrology when they had like a page of like your horoscope, and and it was usually something about, like often it was related to romance, like, oh, you have a secret admirer, all this kind of stuff, right? And it was goofy and fun, but that was like, and I think that is still, we still see that in some magazines, and it's kind of fluff. And so what I want to ask you here is, because for a long time, for me, astrology meant your zodiac sign. And I've learned that it's so much more than that. So can you talk a little bit about how really it's the zodiac signs? How do I want to say this? Oh, the connection between zodiac signs and like planets, the moon, the sun.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the best way to explain this is like most people know what their quote unquote astrology sign is, right? Like whatever their sun sign is, they'll be like, for example, I'm a Sagittarius. My sun is in the sign of Sagittarius. And that's just one very small sliver. That's like the ABCs, if you will, of astrology is what your sun sign is. But if you go a little bit deeper, people will often say, like, well, what are your big three? And then you're like, oh, well, and I'll use my own chart again as an example. I'm a sun in Sagittarius, I'm an Aquarius rising, and my moon is in Libra. And so if we just consider that for a moment, that kind of lets us know that there's more than just one planet that is controlling the conversation and controlling the energies. Um, Really, when we are born, the time in which we enter, our souls enter our bodies and we begin our journey on this planet and this life, we have a time and a place when that occurs, and that is what dictates our natal chart. And it is so much more detailed than I'm a Sagittarius or I'm a Scorpio. Um, every single planet and star that was in the sky at the moment you were born is part of the picture of that natal chart. And all of these energies have a personality based on the sign and degree that they were at the time that you came into your body. And that's what we call a natal chart. And every single planet, from the sun to the moon to Mercury, Venus, all the way to Pluto and asteroids as well, they're having this conversation. And it's within the subtleties and the nuances of this conversation, this cosmic conversation between these people, energies, if you will. I think of them as people, because I don't know, I think I study mythology as well, and I see like the embodiment of those mythical gods in the characteristics and the traits of the planets. So, I mean, for example, right now, Mars is in Cancer, which is a very different expression and mood of Mars, if you will, than if he were in Aries. So if we start to consider the subtleties of where planets are transiting at the time of somebody's birth in detail, that can give us clues about that person's personality, their proclivities, and what I like to think of as their baseline operating system. Like, and if they don't know what those proclivities are enough to really consider whether or not they're making sort of just unconscious decisions, whether they're really thinking about whether or not something is something they want to do, or this is just what feels natural or comes naturally to them, or questioning the motives behind that, that's that's the key to using astrology to kind of wake up and become conscious, I think. Getting to know yourself, it is a bit of a navel gaze, kind of looking at your inner world and considering, well, I've always done things this way, but maybe if I try doing it this other way, the energy that is somewhat lacking in my chart, maybe things will change for me or shift in a positive way. Um, so I hope that begins to answer your question a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure, yeah, I mean, like I mean, I'm sure there is much more to this than we can cover in an hour. So, if you read about zodiac signs, whether it's online or books, and let's say a certain sign has these certain characteristics. So would you say that's sort of like a broad, kind of a broad general view of it, and then but looking at your natal chart is the way to really get the detailed
yes, yeah,
breakdown of what
yeah,
your sort of energetic or spiritual
yeah.
characteristics are?
Yeah, your roadmap, your kind of baseline operating system, your most basic proclivities, what you're sort of wired to do and respond to in certain ways. I think that reading, and I don't suggest that everybody become an astrologer because it is a rabbit hole. Um, it is, and it takes a long time of consistent, considered study and learning to really understand the nuances of the whole picture. And also life cycles, there are certain periods of our lives that we go through, each and every one of us, where it's literally like clockwork, because planets are coming back into a position of stress, or we're having a return of some sort, and it's like, okay, and you're flipping the switch and chaos happens. Um, so I think, um, it's a reading about the signs and the planets and their different signs and the elements and the modalities and the things that these planets like and don't like when they're in certain signs is great. But nothing really beats having a session with an astrologer who is experienced, because it's like having a specialist that you go to who, like, we all have lawyers and we have doctors that we go to. We're not all expected to be lawyers. We're not all expected to be doctors. And there are things that people see because they practice on a regular basis. There are themes, and we can help guide people in a way that is much more helpful than just reading a book that's sort of basic surface level knowledge.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been doing this for about 15 years or so, I think.
Yeah, I started studying astrology in 2008.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and so I started a podcast in 2018. So 3 years from now, it'll be 20 years that
Oh,
I've
so
been,
yeah,
yeah,
I think I was thinking about 2018 with the podcast, but 2008 was
yeah,
when you started studying. So yeah, that's much longer.
yeah. It took me 10 years of active study as a hobby before I ever got confident enough. And even like when I first started the podcast back in 2018, I didn't think of myself as an astrologer. I thought of myself as somebody who was a meditator, who was like, let's use the cycles of the moon to meditate. And then people were like, oh, you're an astrologer. And I was like, well, I never thought of myself as that, but I guess you're right. Like, it was not something that I set out to do until I realized I was already doing it. And then I was like, well, I guess I might as well cop to it, like, all right, I guess I'm an astrologer. Not me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I listened to a more recent episode where you were talking about the new moon in Aquarius. And I'm an Aquarius. I was born January 31st, and I picked this one because I was like, oh, I want to see
Yeah.
what she had to say about this month and this time. And you talked about a lot of transformation and rebirth, and even just what you were talking about in the beginning when we first started chatting, and you were talking about the kind of the shifts that you've been feeling lately and up and down. And
Yeah.
it all was just, it was very validating for me because in the past week, I've had a lot of like feeling like I'm sort of in limbo and feeling really
Yeah.
emotional. And hearing this and learning this is very validating. Also, I think that someone could learn more about what's going on with their, um, what would you call it? Your universal energy, your planetary,
Oh,
what you
yeah.
could learn about what's going on and then use it as, I think there's a fine line between blaming and saying, oh,
Oh, yeah.
oh,
Oh,
well, nothing I can do about it because
yeah.
the new moon is in Aquarius. Oh, well. And then, but using it as a education and like, oh, okay, this explains this. Now I
Yeah.
can take different action.
I will say that one of my biggest pet peeves with people in general in life, and something I really try to like drill down into myself to do, is culpability. Taking responsibility for the choices that we make. And that doesn't mean we're always going to make the right choice, because life can be messy, it can be complicated, it can be nuanced, and there can be things that are just left unsaid between people that linger in your head for decades, and you wonder, what if, you know? Um, but that being said, we do have to take responsibility for our actions. There is a difference between saying like, well, at the time, this seemed like the best choice at that point in time. In hindsight, I wish I had done X, Y, and Z different. And next time this kind of situation comes around, I can change my behavior. Especially when you get feedback from people who are like, hey, something you said really bothered me, or something you did hurt me. And they're asking for an apology of some sort, you know? Um, Communication's key, but also like that communication isn't always necessarily external. A lot of times people won't say shit to you if you have pissed them off or freaked them out or done something that, you know, didn't sit well with them. But one thing that astrology is good at, it is helpful if you are open to it, to considering the transits, sort of like when you wade into a river, you can feel the water eddying around your legs. You can dip your hand into it and you can kind of feel like, okay, this is the vibe today. What do I do? How do I move my hand to navigate across and through this river without harming myself to get to where I want to go, while also like being here in this moment, living this life now. Um, and I think that it can help hold up a mirror to ourselves for us if we're able to be open-minded to read what these transits bring up for us and consider them internally, and how our choices might affect the people around us, you know, and doing that coupled with understanding the larger transits in the world can give us a lot of space to hold for other people who are going through a hard time. And that's the other thing that I think astrology is an excellent tool for. It's great for cultivating empathy, because if you can look back at a certain point in time and consider like, okay, you know, I went through my Saturn return when I was 30 and I was an idiot and things were horrible. And you meet somebody who's 30 and they're acting like a total jackass, you might kind of be able to consider that there are things unfolding in this person's life that you aren't privy to, and that might be affecting the way that they're showing up. And you can extend that person a little bit of kindness and a buffer, if you will. You know, protect yourself, protect your own energy, but don't just automatically want to, you know, berate and put somebody down just because they showed up in that one particular way this one time, you know. And I'm a big believer in empathy and kindness and extending that to humanity, because that's how we collectively heal, as a people. Um, so that's just my point of view, though. But I think it's a great tool for all of these things. And working with an astrologer can help you to sort of track patterns in your life, like, do you have an issue with your mom? Well, let's look at what's going on with your moon, for example, or your fourth house. Or and maybe keep an eye out for when those things might be triggered so that you are aware of this little blip on the horizon so that you can show up to the table calmly, without being reactionary and without a victim mindset, where you're in control of your emotions as best you can be. We're all going to be thrown curveballs, but it's really a great tool for mindfulness, which is really what I and my brand is about. It's using astrology for mindfulness meditation, and then through that, hopefully manifesting the life you want on some level, whether it's just a feeling in your heart that you carry with you, or it's actually here in the tangible 3D world.
Yeah. And, I'm also hearing that this, learning about astrology is a way to help increase your self-awareness. And that's something that I talk about a lot. And it's, you know, increasing your self-awareness is always a good idea, and it's very valuable. And, it sounds like the more you learn about astrology and how it affects your energy, then it can help increase your awareness by explaining some things. And there might be certain behavior patterns you have, maybe in certain relationships, maybe in certain situations. And understanding this could shed some new light on this and help you see it from a new perspective. And also take the judgment out of it. Be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I always show up this way when I see my mom. I always show up this way. I'm whatever it
Yeah.
is, cranky or judgy or whatever. And then you start to learn this stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe because it's these things that are going on, and then it can help you, witness yourself
Mhm.
and make some shifts, even small shifts, just by learning how there are some things that are happening that you can't see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And even small shifts, small little changes that you make over time, incrementally, can have huge follow-on effects, like I think of so Virgo is, I think, the classic sign for where this really shows up. Virgo is the sign of making small choices that are reasonable and grounded in reality, and they do not want any fluff or fanciful, highfalutin talking, anything. They really just want something that is like, does this make sense? Is this reliable? It's sort of the Volvo if it was a car. It's like there's some sexy Volvos out there and there's some sexy Virgos too, but really it's about safety. And is it reliable? Is it practical? And is it reasonably affordable? But it's about making these small little incremental changes to your daily operating lifestyle and procedures. Are you eating a really healthy breakfast in the morning that's just full of nutrient dense foods that are relatively low in calories, but really going to fuel you in a positive way at the start of the day? Or are you picking out on Pop Tarts, like, which might taste good in the moment, but it's a ton of empty calories and they don't really have a lot of uh, nutrient density there. The results of a lifetime of making those two very different choices will have different results, right? Um, and so I think that astrology as a whole, as a practice, can be really useful for identifying things that we can shift within ourselves that we do have control over. I think a lot of frustration shows up in the world because people feel like they're powerless, and they're stuck in certain situations. And while, yes, sometimes, people truly are held prisoner externally somehow by situations, but the one thing that each and every single one of us has control over is how we react, how we think. And if we acknowledge, the situation that we feel trapped in and try to look at it in a way that can give us a fresh perspective where, okay, well, maybe I am trapped. Maybe I am literally in a jail cell somewhere and I am prisoner here. Well, what can I do internally with my energy and my time that can shift the energy, the mood, the vibe internally first? You know, whether that is, okay, if you can just close your eyes and get into a space of being centered and just feeling warmth and love around you. Because I am convinced that we're all on this planet because at some point somebody loved somebody else. And we came from that love at some point. You know, we are physical expressions, our bodies are physical expressions of love from some point. We wouldn't have survived if somebody didn't love us enough to feed us, clothe us, bathe us when we were children. You know, like we wouldn't be here at all if there wasn't some kind of love. Now, you know, there are some cases where people don't know what love feels like. They have biological differences, but there is, for I would say most people, the ability to know what love feels like and to sit in that. Even if it's just closing your eyes and imagining what it feels like to be hugged. And that costs nothing. You don't need to go to a store and buy it. And it's something that we can do internally to help shift the mood, shift that internal dialogue and that narrative to something that's more positive. And I think if you can start with the energy and the vibe that you are feeling in your mind and in your heart, that begins to shift the external reality around you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love that you talked about shifting what's around you by starting inside. It's 100%. Oh, before I forget. Who said that? 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 Who said that?
So I sign my emails, like every email has the phrase, "I wish you all the best the stars have to offer." And that's just something I came up with when I started my professional astrology journey, because I think a lot of people would come to me and ask me like, "Oh, well, are my boyfriend and I going to get married?" Or, you know, if I didn't have good news necessarily, like, well, you know, I don't know that these two charts really align in the best way for that. That might not necessarily be the worst thing to be told. Because I think with every position, there is a positive expression of planetary positions and there's negative positions, but it's what you dial in and focus on that you cultivate that shows up more and more and more for you. And I think, you know, that phrase, that quote, all the best the stars have to offer, it speaks to, even in the worst situations, there is some beautiful experience, some sort of deeper understanding and inner knowing that comes from that experience that we would not have had the opportunity to come to know had we not lived through it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's such a cool way to sign off.
Cool, thank you. My other favorite one, just off the top of my head, is from Carl Sagan. We are stardust. And so I think there's something really magical about that saying and that idea that we are literally the stuff of the cosmos. So how could the stars and the planets not have an effect on us if it's literally, like, if you think about quantum physics and entanglement, and it makes sense that if things are happening, you know, as above, so below, and we're the below here on this planet, and above is what's going on in the skies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Carl Sagan because I definitely saw he has a lot of cool. There are a lot of cool quotes from Carl Sagan about
Right.
this kind of stuff. Let me see if I. It's not coming up on my computer. Here it is. Our biological rhythms are a symphony of the cosmos. music embedded deep within us to which we dance, even when we can't name the tune. And that's Deepak Chopra. Love him.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great quote. And I think a lot of us, most of the time, we have no idea what the tune is. Uh, to be fair, we're kind of just bipping and bobbing along, doing our thing. And it's not possible to walk around fully enlightened every moment of every day. I don't think that, us as humans, when we're living in this world, this society, I don't know that that's entirely possible. Um, but I do think that making a regular date with yourself to check in every 2 weeks on a new moon, on a full moon, that's my practice. I think that really can help to ground us in those in between times, which are most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Most of the time is the in-between time. So can you tell me what it would look like to have a private session with you?
Sure, yeah. So people book on my calendar on my website. They go over to bloodmoonmilk.com. They click book a session. If you're a first time newbie, you get a longer session. So it's I think it's 250, I think, for a first time session with me. That's about an hour and 15 minutes, but I usually leave that fairly open ended to have a full conversation with somebody. And it's over Zoom, so you can be wherever you want in the world. And you'll fill out a short questionnaire that tells me your birth time, your place, and so I can cast your natal chart and we have a conversation. And it's a lot of education the first time session. And I run transits for that person from our first time and sometimes usually a little bit before our first time so that they can learn how to read transits by having that gift of hindsight, so they can go back in time a little bit and be like, what was that thing that was driving me crazy on 2 weeks ago. Because most people come to me when shit is popping off in their life. It's people who are going through some kind of crisis of some sort, and I want to help them unpack it, understand it, and give them a timeline of when things can resolve and what they can expect. But that's just a first time session. There's only so much we can pack into an hour and some change. And so I like to see people quarterly because that gives us the chance to get to know each other, but also let the planets move and do their thing, and to put these practices into action, like really think about what we're doing. And so I like to, after the first time session, you come back for a second session, and I'll look at every new moon, every full moon for you, and where it's going to be at, and what houses it's going to be showing up in, to kind of give you an action plan and a template for, how to set some realistic goals in your life, to be considerate of, to think about. And I listen to people. It's a non-judgmental space. We talk about what's going on. And that's kind of, what I do. And I get my clients get transits, so they get their own personalized horoscopes they can read. I also do a newsletter called The Daily Dose I think it's $8 a month to sign up for. That's more general, like what's the flavor of the day, if you will, the soup of the day, the cosmic soup. But the transits you get from me by being my client are personalized to you. And so I always suggest people have both, because this is your internal world and this is the external world. And then you living your experience can kind of blend these two energies together for a really robust understanding of the weather you're swimming in.
Very cool. Can you give me a little refresher here on when you're talking about transits,
Oh, yeah.
what exactly that
Transits
means?
so we talked about natal charts, right? Earlier, that's everybody's unique individual blueprint that they get when they're born. Transits think of it like the astrological weather for a certain time, day. They're always happening. The planets never take a day off. So it's the transiting planets that we are talking about when I say transits. So right now we're in the midst of some pretty intense transits between Venus retrograde, which is going on. Mercury retrograde's about to happen in a week or so. We're also in the midst of eclipse season, and we've got Neptune moving out of Pisces, the sign he rules, and into Aries at the end of March. So March really is a fully like just chock full month. It's probably the most active month of the whole year. Things are not going to look the same in April. And so if you were listening to this and you were feeling like you don't know if you're coming or going, and you're up 1 minute, you're down 1 minute, I'm right there with you, you know? But understanding what all is going on, it can help us to feel a little bit more grounded and less victimized by circumstances, and we can kind of center ourselves and become more reflective in a practiced way. And that's what I help people do. You know, it is work though. People have to do this work. It is inner work that people have to show up for and take responsibility for. But once they do it, I mean, I see incredible growth from people. And it's pretty amazing to feel and to get to witness it, you know, and see that sort of get shepherded through profound times of transformation.
Yeah. And would you say,
Like, is this typical for March, or is this just this
No.
year?
This is just this year. I mean,
Okay.
2025 is, I've been calling it the year of change. We have every single planet changing signs in a 12-month period, when some of these planets take upwards of 20 years to change signs. And I've never, ever seen all of the outer planets change signs in 1 year before. So that means a lot of shifts showing up, and a lot of volatility, and people don't love change. You know, we like our comfort zones. So when
Mhm.
change is happening, it's really uncomfortable. People get triggered, they get reactionary, and they grab on to what's comfortable and familiar. But really, a lot of times with change, it's much more comfortable if you let go and lean into the flow of the universe's rhythms. So right now, we're in Pisces season, and Venus is she's retrograde in the sign of Aries, and she's going to be going backwards into the sign of Pisces. And I love this parable from Greek mythology about Pisces energy. And I think it's also, we all are north nodes in Pisces right now too, which is a slightly more advanced astrological concept. But I think it's really exciting and lovely way to think about what we're kind of dealing with at the moment with all of this change that's on the horizon. So Aphrodite and Eros were cosmic lovers, and they were having a date on like a riverbank one day, and there was a Titan who was a big giant. I forget his name off the top of my head, but basically he was out to ruin their date, and he seemed like a really angry big man who was really powerful, and he was going to get them. He was going to eat them or ravage them. You know, nothing good was going to come from this interaction. They couldn't fight him. They were too small and not powerful enough to, I mean, Aphrodite's gift is being beautiful. And while that she is certainly powerful in her own way, like she's not a fighter. But she can transform. So what she did is she changed her and Eros into fish, and they swam in the river away to safety. And I think that going with the flow and leaning into that process of transformation and change is much more beneficial than grabbing on to old, stale things that have maybe just run their course, or the test, you know, they're just kind of worn out, and there's a need for fresh new energy, a different approach. and there's a way to acknowledge these changes in a graceful, kind, loving way. And lean into that transformation to get to a place of safety, a place of romance, a place of sensuality, that feels aligned and fulfilling.
Yeah, I love that parable. And I think it's also a really great metaphor for changing yourself to move through a challenge as opposed to waiting for the things around you to change, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I will say, so with the North Node being in Pisces and the South Node being in Virgo, where Virgo is very much about control and wanting to have answers and all their little ducks in a row, which is lovely. It's great to have that. But right now, the energy of the universe is asking us to let go of control a little bit and to lean into that knowing and that trust that the universe will support us and carry us to a place of safety. And it is the most difficult place cosmically for these nodes to be. So if you're somebody who's out there and you're struggling with letting go of a sense of certainty in your comfort zone, that's totally normal. But maybe ask yourself, just consider what it would feel like if you let go ever so gently, you know, and maybe see where this current can take you. It might be to a better place, maybe.
Yeah,
Certainly if you do it with intention.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. So before we wrap up, could you just take a couple of minutes to share what your podcast is about?
Sure, yeah. So my show is called Blood Moon Milk. It's out there on Spotify, on YouTube, Apple Podcast. And the show has gone through kind of a few versions of itself. I used to love to play music, and I would have a playlist for each of the new moons, full moons, and I love doing that. And I wish I could do that again, but the algorithms for some of these platforms, they're looking for rights for copyrighted music, and they don't want to, they don't want you to infringe on copyright stuff, which I, as an artist, as a creative, I completely respect that. But it's taken away some of the storytelling elements I have at my disposal. And so now I'm really focusing on the transits of a particular new moon or full moon. And I'm starting to do workshops. I'm doing private small groups on Zoom. I'm having groups of people. I look at everybody's chart. We have a conversation. It's $25 a person. They're usually on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock for an hour. And anybody can sign up who gets a spot. And I go through and I'm like, I'll spend time with every person who shows up. And it's supportive, it's kind, it's a non-judgmental place. There's no obligation at all. It's just, is this something that interests you or resonates? Spend some time getting to know yourself and being reflective and doing some of that work. And so, yeah, the podcast it's kind of dense astrology stuff at the moment. I think I'm going to shift gears though. I've been considering whether or not I want to shift the astrological analysis just to workshops only, and then do more interviews with people on my show and talking about other people's astrology and their lived experiences and how that looks. But there will be a podcast. Like I get to interview authors and artists and all kinds of cool people on my show when I'm not doing the astrological analyses. So it's, I'm also going through changes. I'm a human living this experience too. I don't have all the answers. I don't have the formula for, overnight success by any means. Everything I do is sort of iterative, and what feels right and feels aligned and resonates with me. And I explore that and then see how that goes and make changes. So it's definitely a process, but I appreciate my listeners, the ones who show up and people who are interested, who share me. That's how I grow, is word of mouth. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here today and talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to ask real quick if you design the art for your podcast.
I do all the art.
because it's really spectacular. Like, I love it.
Like I scroll, I haven't been able to listen to all of them because there are a lot, but I scrolled through to look at all the art and it's just really lovely.
Oh,
So,
thank you so much. Yeah, my degree is actually in traditional hand-drawn animation.
wow.
So I thought I was going to go work for Disney as an animator. Um, Joke was on me. They closed their hand-drawn department 6 months before I graduated. Um, but I've had a great career in television. I was a producer for a long time. And I worked as a graphic designer and animator and painted murals and kind of sort of became a jack of all trades in terms of art. Um, and I'm in grad school right now. I'm working on my master's degree for the business of art and design. Um, but I don't know that I'm going to do it to be like an art director or anything like that. I'm kind of
Mm.
wanting to learn these practices for my best my own competency, really.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Before we sign off, can you share how people can find you if they want to check out a workshop, they want to work with you one-on-one?
Yep. The best way is to head over to the website. It's bloodmoonmilk.com, all one word. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. On TikTok, it's Blood Moon Milk Astrology. On Insta, it's just at Blood Moon Milk. And yeah, also, if you want the newsletter, that's on the website. If you message me on Instagram, I'll get back to you pretty quickly. And if you want to email me about something, if there's, I do parties and events and stuff like that sometimes for folks. My email is Aurorah with an H at the end at bloodmoonmilk.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again
For making time to chat with me today. It's been pretty educational.
Oh, thank you so much. The pleasure has been entirely mine, and I'm absolutely grateful for the experience.
Thank you. For everyone listening or watching, you are enough just as you are, and you are loved. Make a great day.